Welcome to the Open Talent Report, the award-winning podcast where we dive deep into the emerging trends in global employment, the future of work, the talent crisis, the demographic deficit, and the new world of work with our expert host, Connor Heaney. Connor is the managing director at CXC EMEA, a company that takes the hassle out of finding compliantly engaging and paying contractors anywhere in the world. In this podcast, Connor brings you captivating conversations with top CEOs, visionary founders, and industry experts. Together, they shed light on all things open talent and the evolving nature of work itself. So grab your headphones and join us on this exhilarating journey.
Hello and welcome to this week's show, where I'm delighted to be joined by great friend, great colleague, Scott A Aicher, who is president at CXC North America. I've had the pleasure of knowing Scott for over the last two and a half years. I think it's fair to say that Scott has an amazing experience in the human capital and staffing sector. Previously, Scott was president at the TechServe Alliance, providing valuable advocacy for the technology staffing sector. He's been my colleague and our colleague for the last number of years. He's got a great story to tell, some amazing insights on the human capital and EOR and AOR sector. And Scott has been right at the cutting edge of some of the amazing things that happens in our sector. So Scott, a very warm welcome to the show. It's so good to see you, buddy. How the hell are you doing?
Oh, I'm doing great. Thank you, Connor. I appreciate the kind intro and the words. It's a pleasure to be with you. I mean, you are a celebrity. You are a CXC celebrity. If you get to sit right next to me here, so I'm eager to be part of this.
Thanks very much. A celebrity in a very, very small pond, Scott. But you know, we'll take it. But thank you very much. Thank you very much. It's so good to have you on the show. So, Scott, just for the benefit of our audience, I'm always intrigued and fascinated by the backstories from our guests over the years. So, Scott, what's your story? How did you move into the human capital staffing recruitment sector? And then what was your journey in leadership and throughout executive roles in the human capital sector? And of course, more recently, over the last couple of years here as president at CXC Americas.
Wow. Well, unlike you, Connor, I'm old. I'm an old guy. I'm a bit long in the tooth. Been in the industry over 30 years now, and I think I started out in this industry just like everybody else. It was I had a successful male modeling career that quickly transitioned into the human capital space. But no, like everybody else, Connor, it's nobody sets out after school to say, I'm going to jump into the global talent solutions world. It just kind of happens by happenstance. And without boring the audience, I've done a lot of different things, but I came into it by accident throughout my career. I've had the good fortune to have been an entrepreneur a couple times, starting firms and selling them. Sold my first one while I was very young and still in college. Migrated that to running large publicly traded organizations as well as privately held firms and private equity owned organizations. But I've always been a passionate supporter about global talent. I believe the whole world economy moves on talent. That's the global workforce is the way the rest of the world and the cogs of the world work. So I've always wanted to be part of it, and I've been passionate about it. So you mentioned I was the chairman and part of the executive board of TechServe for a number of years, which those of you globally that may not know TechServe, they're the largest nonprofit industry association focused on IT and engineering talent. Been a part of it for a long time. Been recognized, as my colleague here, Connor, has by SIA as a top 100 global executive by SIA for a number of years. Been doing this a long time. It almost feels like you kind of get nominated because you're just too damn old. So maybe that's why I've been recognized. But really, my whole story, to be honest with you, Connor, is I think when I think through my journey, it all comes down to leadership. And I'll tell you what, I started in this business probably being a pretty crappy leader at first, right? You got to have some self-awareness. And I thought I was doing the right thing coming in. And it took a lot of people. You know, the old story of it takes a village, right? It took a village to kind of build to where I am today. A lot of mistakes. You learn from those mistakes. And I think that's what's crafted where I am today. Because I think leadership needs to be different in today's world. And when I say leadership, it's just not about leading an organization. It's about mentoring people. And it's mentoring employees, it's mentoring clients, it's mentoring relationships. It's all about that connectivity. And I think my journey's been all about taking those lessons from leadership to where I am today. It's about figuring out how that leadership drives into transformation strategies as an organization, as an industry, and the positive impact that we can make on the global workforce solution space. And when I say the impact, I use this term that's value at every corner. Even if you never buy anything from me, every conversation I want to have, I want that customer to say, I left this dialogue with value. And that's lost today by most executives anymore. I'm a hands-on executive, always have been, so I'm in the trenches. Most of our contemporary peers take their information from data points, not from actually being in the crux of it. And I will always stay a part of that. So I think the other things that's kind of crafted is I've been able to navigate and figure out how to navigate the complexity issues that face the industry, the scalability issues, the different nuances of accessing and unlocking global talent. And couldn't be more excited because that's a big reason why I came here to CXC, because global enterprises today face major shifts in workforce strategies. They need to. The global landscape of talent is changing, and the traditional models in contingent workforce solution space don't work anymore. They work a little bit here and there, but they're not truly solving the problems. They're not truly cutting spend costs as it relates to your overall enterprise spend as it relates to talent, either statement of work, direct sourcing. All these nuances by themselves provide some level of hope, and our organizations trying to couple together, but there's nobody that truly can do it seamlessly. And that's a big reason why I came here. To be honest with you, the reason why I came to CXC after 30 years of being in the traditional global staffing talent space, I know for a fact the world's changing and you need a good global capability to access. And when I talked to Pete and Ingrid and had a chance to spend time with you, Connor, the whole thing I was seeking out is a platform that would allow unbiased, uncomplicated global scale. CXC, with the foundation of our payroll, AOR, EOR capabilities, provides that tremendous highway and backbone to do the most unique things in the industry. And I think CXC is the best in the business to do it. And I'm proud to be part of it. So that's a little bit. I don't want to bore your audience. I've been around a long time, done a lot of different stuff, but couldn't be more excited to be here.
Wow. Well, Scott, I love that story. And Scott, I what you've said about leadership really resonates with me, because I think I've made more mistakes than actually done things correctly. And I think the beauty of that is as long as you don't make the same mistakes over and over again, then you're probably learning from that. But I think what benefited me most, particularly in the earlier part of my career, maybe 10, 15 years ago, is that I was lucky to have a CEO at the time take me under his wing. I don't know if he felt sorry for me, felt that I could maybe do something for him. There's probably a whole host of reasons, right? But I think ultimately I made the business money looking back, although the CFO at the time might have deferred. But did you have someone, Scott, or did you have a series of people over your career that sort of identified something in you that went, this guy has something about him, and I'm going to take him with me? Is there anyone that you want to sort of, maybe not single out, but did you get that sort of experience coming through your career? And have you sought to pay that forward, Scott, with your teams over the years?
I would say most definitely, Connor. I think it's similar, because I've learned as much from the horrible leaders I've worked for, because we're in an industry that unfortunately has some pretty crappy leadership. But I've also been honed, most importantly, by the very good ones. And I've worked for a number of them, and they know who they are. And I still stay in touch with all of those that have been mentors to me in the business world. So most definitely. But it all started, and not to sound hokey or to sound emotional in this process, but it all started with my dad, to be honest with you. My dad came from nothing. He was born in the projects here in Detroit. Was a janitor at a robotics organization, came up from a janitor, ended up being an executive within that organization. with very little education,
Wow.
just hard work. And the one thing that always stuck with me, it all starts with, it all starts with that drive and work ethic. My dad used to always reinforce with me is you want to always outwork the person next to you and the person down the street from you at all times. And that's where the foundation began. And then I honed it through great leaders, right? I've had, as you referenced, I've got great leaders I've worked for. I've had great leaders that are friends of mine that I take guidance from. I mean, shoot, Connor, you and I talk. When you could give advice, I listen. I've been doing this a long time, but I learned things brand new from somebody 2 weeks on the job, right? So as a leader, I think you got to be open to it. So for me, I think that's the same experience you've had is the experience I've had. But I think more than anything was the negative experience I've had. I know what exactly not to do because I've had to live through it with leaders and their own egos, forget how to really drive and mentor people. And there's a lot of it, unfortunately, in this industry. And so that's kind of crafted who I am, I think.
I think two of the things that you said, Scott, really resonate with me. And your dad's story is an amazing story. I love that. It reminds me of my grandfather, who's 92 this year. Scott, this guy puts me to shame. Right, he's got a 6-pack still, and he's 92. Works out every day. Swims 5 times a week. He's a real inspiration to me. But he always taught my brothers and my sister about the value of hard work and respecting people and good manners and all that. And he always said that hard work and talent combined will always outperform talent, because it's okay to be talented, but if you don't put in the hard work, well, then you never get anywhere. And I think that second point, Scott, in terms of learning from leaders who don't lead well, right? Who treat people like commodities and treat people badly. I agree. That really resonates with me. But we'll talk about that over a beer or some sort of suitable beverage soon, Scott. But both of those things really echo with me. But your dad's story is something else. I love people that can start at what is often referred to as the bottom and work their way up. Come what may, and it's so inspiring. I love it. Good on him.
Well, I mean, for your audience, first of all, I am not probably the most articulate speaker, so I apologize. I just kind of speak from my heart. So if it comes across as, wow, this guy shouldn't be in front of a group of people, I apologize. That's just how I communicate.
I love it, Scott. So, Scott, one of the things that's fascinated me, and we've discussed on many of our podcast shows over the last couple of years, is around some of the really interesting things that are going on in the labour markets, in the Western labour markets in particular. And if I look at United States of America, where you sit today, Scott, I think it's the best labour market in terms of full employment since when President Nixon was in office some 51 years ago. It's phenomenal, right? And I think Ireland, where I'm based today, where it's bloody freezing, by the way, not quite where it is, not quite as cold as where you are up in over in Michigan, Scott, but it is cold. We're at full employment. UK is at full employment, even though the economy's struggling there. Likewise, Germany and Netherlands, right? So you got this full employment problem. You got these demographic shifts whereby there's less people in the workforce, right? They've either can't get into the country. We haven't produced enough people over a 50, 60-year period. Unfortunately, COVID took a lot of people out. And my question really is, Scott, what the hell is going on? And is there anything that we as a sector and industry leaders and commentators can do about it? What's your thoughts? How do we solve some of these problems around what's going on in the labour market, Scott?
Yeah, I think it's a big problem. I not too long ago I had a meeting with a bunch of global CIOs of large financial institutions, and the question they posed to me on the panel was, Scott, how do we win the war on talent? How do enterprises win the war on talent today? And my common response that I had in that meeting, which probably shocked the group, was, what do you mean win? You've already lost. The global war on talent is done. You can't dictate any longer, this is what we're going to do, because talent is going to drive the way in which they want to work. And as you mentioned, with full employment and also shrinking shrinking enrollments within STEM skill set programs throughout the U.S. and globally, um, the predictors are that there's going to be a hell of a lot more jobs than there are people in the next 3 years, and it's only can continue to get worse and worse by a factor of two every year after that. So it's going to be a very big problem. So the first thing is you need to get out of your own myopic view and say, I need to start thinking global. So the first thing is all about borderless talent solutions. So what I advise most enterprises when they go in and start looking at resource planning, you immediately start beginning with what truly can be virtual and what can we do in potentially other global markets to capitalize on that talent, but also capitalize on the talent that may be at a better cost rate so that you can reinvest in programs that are going to develop folks that need to be right on site. So you've got to start there and first say, what can I have purely virtual? What can I have then hybrid? What can I then have that's going to be contract versus perm employee? And start looking at now fit for purpose type of hiring strategies, not fit for let's hire this full-time role. So I think you got to have more pliability in your contingent workforce strategies and structures. So that's the first thing is get over yourself saying, we want everybody. I know that everybody's going to try and push, go back to work. And I think that's great. Let's do that where it's possible. But that is not going to solve, the biggest challenge, which is access to talent, which you're going to have some visibility on. I think you need to look at alternative workforce models. You can't always just say, put them into this box at 9 to 5 or 8 to 5, whatever your process is. You can't just say, we're going to have a small little direct sourcing piece to help us offset this. Let's look at some other alternatives, not just how do we embrace contractors difference, how do we leverage the freelance community, which those are growing by about 17% a year. So you better have a model for that and a solution that's compliant for you, which obviously CXC, we're the best in the world at doing that. And you got to really drive into that digital nomad space and fill those skill gaps quickly. I mean, that's why we've launched tools like Out of Office and stuff like that as an organization. So these are things as an enterprise you got to look at. But the other thing is how are you going to leverage AI and automation, which I know AI is a big thing. And Connor, you've had a lot of podcast discussions around AI, and we talk about it often. It is here and it's here to stay. But with that, you can't over automate what is very human. The one thing I stand by here at CXE and what we stand by as, and regardless of CXE, just as a philosophy, it's got to start with people. You got to have a set of eyeballs on this by leveraging the huge backbone of great technology. But AI is going to be a part of that and helping you navigate navigate these new worlds. Because I'll tell you what, I used to be anti-AI. Now I'm embracing it as much as I can because I'll tell you what, it is very helpful. But you got to be careful with it. And you got to, I talk a lot about this, and I used to run different programs in high schools. I used to design them to try and create, for example, cybersecurity experts, starting at the high school and middle school level. I think those things need to start with reskilling and upskilling workforces that are uncommon workforces that are coming up through the ranks. And it's, I mentioned about looking at low-cost labor markets through a global lens to reskill your current workers. But as enterprises, we've got to band together and figure out how do we grow our talent bases in our local communities as well. And I think that takes investment, that takes time. I'm happy to be part of those type of solutions, but that's the only way we're really going to solve it. Because we're not putting enough resources into this space. So we've got to go after it. And that starts with the young minds. And there are some brilliant kids in the space. And so I would always advocate for trying to build some infrastructure around, creating that type of reskilling solution in your communities.
Scott, I love that, what you've just laid out there, the thoughtfulness behind it. And one thing really struck a chord with me there is about the sort of the younger folks. And this is my personal opinion. I've got two daughters, they're 8 and 5. I know you got two boys. One is just off the payroll, right? He's in the workforce now, as I understand it. And the other boy is still on the payroll in a college. But it strikes me on a general basis, Scott, that the education system of today isn't even fully preparing our kids for the jobs of today, let alone the jobs of tomorrow, right? I mean, if I think back to how my kids are learning today, it's not dramatically different from when I was in sort of elementary school. God, I'm afraid to say it, 35 odd years ago, right, Scott, or whatever it was. And I think that upskilling and reskilling piece, yes, absolutely for the workforce. But in my mind, policymakers might need to even take that a step backwards or forwards into the kids that are in elementary school and high school level. Scott, what's your take on that? Is that too simplistic a view, or does that echo with you also?
No, it echoes with me. And the challenge that everyone has is having the fortitude to commit to it. Everybody talks about it. I'm in a lot of different boards, nonprofit and for-profit boards over my time, and everybody says the same thing, but it takes somebody actually put their foot forward and say, "This is what we're going to do, and this is how we're gonna make this happen." And it always starts with grassroots, but grassroots start to lose their funding. It's a costly thing, so we need the entire globe and entire global regions to say we're committed to doing this in different ways. I don't know how to solve it. I'm not a politician. I'm probably a horrible politician at that if it ever came to it. But there needs to be a better push, I think, globally to say this is what we're going to commit to and try and help, because this problem's not going to go away. I mean, you look at even just you talked about elementary schools. It should start there. You talk about middle schools, high schools, but you even look at what's happening within the universities today. The majority of the enrollees are foreign nationals coming in that are going to the schools and then they're going back. So we're seeing a lot of, all this flight happening. So we've got to figure out, starting at the elementary school, how we get them interested to go in these programs in the first place, because they are there, but we're just not pushing them. And I think it also starts with parents, Connor. I think it comes down to parents being involved in guiding, their kids, instead of saying, "Hey, go get a underwater basket weaving degree. Maybe you should do something that's really going to help society a little bit differently." And if as parents get more involved, I think that's going to help too, because you can only have so much where the government and private enterprise helps. It starts at the home too, and you've got a thriving family with that's young, that's coming up, and they're going to be brilliant. I'm proud of my kids. I think they're going to do amazing things in this world today because they come with that mindset. So I think it begins there. It all starts in the home, bud.
I agree. Like, Scott, I think we'll come on to this later in the show around AI and its potential impact on jobs and jobs displacement. But if I was thinking back to my time at school, which, I didn't cover myself in glory academically, I probably enjoyed the social element of school more and the sports element of school more. But, like, thinking back, we were always, at least in the schools I went to, we were always geared towards the professions, right? The traditional doctor, lawyer, accountant, tax engineer, right? The sort of high paying at the time, middle class, upper middle class professions. And of course, that's where we all ended up initially, right? And at least in my family and a lot of my peers, right? And then here I am in the human capital sector. But anyway, this show is about you, Scott, not me. But I suppose, if I had known back in the 1990s that I could have earned more as a plumber, electrician, a construction engineer, right? Like, it strikes me with the coming wave of jobs displacement, and of course those jobs will be replaced, but it strikes me that perhaps should be better training as a plumber, electrician, and engineer, as opposed to training as a lawyer, a tax advisor, an accountant, and potentially even a doctor, which sounds mad to say. Like, what's your read on that, Scott? Do you think there's probably more scope for looking at what have been described as like the vocational type professions? Maybe is the correct phrase.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's and those are skill sets again that are in high demand. Strong earners. I mean, my youngest son, I'm so proud of him. He's going to get his engineering degree, but he just wants to work on cars.
Yes.
He does not have any delusions of grandeur saying, "Oh, I'm going to go design the next cool, electric vehicle." He's like, "I want to help organizations and automotive firms and human beings get from point A to B with their vehicles that they have today." And he doesn't want these big fancy things. He just wants to be getting in there, working with a wrench and making good things happen. And you can make a tremendous income on this and be very happy, good white work-life balance, all those things. Couldn't agree with you more, Connor. It's not just the STEM skill sets, but also the skilled labor skill sets, that are important. Because frankly, there are many, it used to be like even in IT, used to be go in and get your IT degree, either MIS or whatever degree or certification is. I don't downplay the need for education when I'm telling you there are kids coming right out of high school with all their IT backgrounds that are just as good as somebody with their master's degree in IT because they're starting so early. So the days of saying, I need this piece of paper doing this to be able to solve this problem or this skill set are no longer necessary. Again, let me use the caveat. I am not saying don't get education. I'm just saying that there are alternatives to be looking at. And what you just referenced, I couldn't have said it better, Connor. I'm with you 100%.
Yeah, I think you raise a great point there, though, Scott, in terms of this, right? So for years, if you think about the typical large or medium-sized company or even a small company, right? You look at any job ad, right? I'm talking of my experience in Ireland, UK, Europe, right? But often it will say college degree, university degree, right? And about 2 or 3 years ago, I thought, what the hell are we doing, right? You don't need a bloody university degree to work in international expansion and payroll. You need to be smart. You need to know our numbers, you need to know law and stuff. But that we can train for. What you can't train for, in my view, is ability and aptitude and attitude, right? And if I can expand my point further, Scott, I often think that organizations are actually reducing their access to talent availability or available talent by screening out for things like university, college degree. And then potentially, if you take that a step further, right? Like you think about some of the stupid stuff you do at college. I'm not saying you, Scott, but I certainly did, right? I got misdemeanors that are still coming up 30 years later or 25 years later, right? So for something stupid that I did when I was 17, that was completely minor, right? And I suppose my point is, no one wants their accountant to be a fraud, right? Or convicted of fraud. But the way we screen in terms of a job applicant's journey, right? Do you have a college degree? No. Okay, gone. Do you have some form of credit problem? Gone, right? Do you have some form of misdemeanor when you were 14? Gone, right? And if you think about how we're excluding those people, for me, that's quite troubling. What's your take on that, Scott? Have you a more nuanced view on that?
No, I'm with you 100%. I think that limits your scope. I think it's antiquated. I think it's first of all, it lacks all logic in terms of why do you even do those things. It baffles me. But one thing I've learned in being in this a long time, logic does not dictate anything in this world anymore. And what seems to make sense is always shifting and changing, even though when you put it in front of you, you're like, why aren't we doing this? It just, it baffles me. And it takes me back. My wife has been a professor at the university level, and over times I've had the opportunity to speak to graduating classes. And I'm going to be honest, in most cases, it was very disheartening. And what I mean by that is you had a lot of incoming graduates or outgoing graduates that had this sense of entitlement, that thought, because I have this, I deserve X, Y, and Z, and I deserve, all the fringe benefits. And they haven't really worked for very much at that time. And again, I think it starts at the home, but we're not given the reality sessions that are needed for incoming employees at all anymore. And as employers, we are not breaking down the barriers that start to omit what could be amazing employees because of an arbitrary element that we put in our HR guideline. It makes no flipping sense. It drives me insane, and nobody's ever going to convince me that is going to make sense. It doesn't mean I'll ever change it, but I think there's a level of there's a lack of true understanding of the way the world works by most enterprises that impose these type of arbitrary rules.
I'm with you, Scott, 100%, and so well articulated. Scott, there's a question we hadn't thought to discuss when we were prepping for the show, and I just want to get your take on it, if it's okay. And it's really around the staffing sector. So I started in the staffing sector tail end of 2006, right? So the staffing sector, I think at that point, started in London, had moved really from, couriering CVs, faxing CVs to, I think at that point, emailing CVs, VMSs, vendor management systems were available then, applicant tracking systems were available then. But when I started, of course, I started at the bottom, right? And that's what I love about staffing, right? It's a meritocratic profession whereby if you're good enough and you make companies enough money, you send up the ranks, right? Now, of course, that doesn't always mean that you should be the CEO, as I found to my cost, right? When I did become that, I wasn't ready, didn't have a clue, right? And rightfully got what's the phrase, shit canted. Anyway, that aside, but I suppose what I wanted to ask you about, for me, I always felt that the sector, Scott, was ripe for disintermediation. And I always compared it in my mind to the financial services sectors, which in the 1980s in Chicago and London and New York had what was called its Big Bang moment. They moved from essentially a people-based broker-trader, sales-based system where you would execute an order with the person, he or she would then relay it to the next person and the deal would be done. And then they moved to computers supported by people and vice versa. And that was the Big Bang moment. And of course, it launched a 40-year expansion period in financial service. But it strikes me that the recruitment and staffing sector hasn't had its Big Bang moment. And perhaps it might just need that in terms of disintermediation, because we've seen so many talent platforms emerge. I think I've lost track about, there must be a couple of thousand at this point, probably more. You've got behemoths like Upwork and freelancer.com and so many others like it. And it strikes me that the sector's open and ripe for disintermediation. What's your take on that, Scott? Because I know you've been in the sector, or at least adjacent to it, for quite some time, like myself. Do you think it needs a Big Bang moment, or maybe there has been and I just have bloody well missed it?
Well, I hope you weren't just calling me old as you just jumped into that, but yeah.
No.
No, yeah, no. Well, let me give you my thoughts. Again, these are just my opinions. All right. So, I'll get on my pulpit here a little bit about the industry. I believe the staffing industry is a bit schizophrenic right now. And what I mean by that is there have been, in all my years of doing this, I'd say every decade, there are a couple of things coming down the pike that were supposed to be a complete disruptor in the staffing industry, which never came to pass. Right. So the internet, when that first came out, I'm an old guy, so I was in this business before the internet existed as a portion of this when we were still faxing stuff back and forth. It was a very different world. And when I seen the internet come in, I'm like, oh, it'll be helpful, but it's not really going to overly change our business. And then everyone's like, oh, it's going to shift it. Now recruiters are going to change. Everything's going to be different. There was an adjustment period, but it really didn't fundamentally change things. And then you had, you mentioned the freelance platforms, the Upworks, the others. There's also been new technologies that have come in. When VMS first came in, they're like, oh, they're going to do away with the staffing world. I've had the good fortune to actually have launched one of the first VMS tools that were web-based way back in the day. And I've launched another one just 10 years ago. So I've had a lot of experience with technology coming in. Again, everyone's worried about how's this going to change? How's this going to change? Well, then the industry adjusted, and it's very pliable. One thing about the staffing industry is it's extremely resilient. And so I've yet to find anything that's really going to be a disruptor until now. Okay. And what I mean about until now, disruptor really is going to be AI. And AI is not going to do away with the business, but it is going to make the staffing industry a hell of a lot more efficient, and it's going to change the role of the recruiter a bit. It's going to change the role of the presentation and process format a bit. It's going to enhance things. It will be a disruption in some ways, but also be a big disruption in a positive way, in my opinion, to the bottom line of staffing firms today. The overwhelming majority of the industry is made up, 80% of the staffing industry in North America is made up of firms under $50 million in revenue. So with that, they live and die by, cash at hand, right? Everything's about how do I bill and pay today, because cash is king in those type of environments. So anything you can do to enhance your business in a more cost-effective way, utilizing tools like this, which I think AI has that capability to really do some different things for the staffing industry, is going to make them more profitable. So I think it'll be both a bit of a disruption more than some of the other ones were. We will adjust to it, but it'll also be a major financial positive, I think, for those that embrace it the right way. So to answer your question, yes, the industry stagnated, but I can tell you we're also resilient. COVID scared the heck out of a lot of staffing firms immediately. They're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? They're like, our clients, everybody's on site. We're going to lose all of our headcount. You know what happened? The pliability within the staffing industry adjusted, absorbed. Enterprise clients said, oh my gosh, roles I thought I couldn't be virtual are now virtual. And the world kept moving forward. There was an impact, obviously. Everybody had a couple tough years, but it rebuilt infrastructures for the staffing industry to be a lot more flexible, which is what I've promoted for 20 years, is figuring out how you create a scalable model that can scale up or down very easily without disruption. That's what I build, are those type of modelings. And that's another reason why I came to CXC, is with our platform, we can do some really cool shit. And I believe we're the best in the world at doing it. So that's why passionately, I think we've got a secret sauce everyone says they have. I think we really do have one. It's not secret in terms of service. I think it's in terms of what we actually provide. I think it's secret in terms of the way we engage. Engagement is different today. Customers want to feel like you're listening and creating a customized solution for them. So staffing firms out there listening to me, have some creativity in what you're doing. For us as a total talent global solutions provider, we need to be more consultants and not productized. That's what's going to make a difference in the world today, in my opinion. The U.S. is at the forefront of some of the most unique kind of solutions that are being developed, and I think that'll carry through the rest of the world.
I love that, Scott, and that is such an amazing analysis, and I love your views on the market. That AI piece, I wholeheartedly agree, will disrupt the sector, because I often thought, Scott, that the recruitment sector is in a way an imperfect market. Like most markets are imperfect, and oftentimes the best recruiters are able to exploit those inefficiencies in the market, right? Because they have the access to the talent, they have the best database or the best relationships or the best network, and speed wins, right? Speed of getting that best person at the best time to the client wins. And for me, I think AI can bring transparency to that process and speed to that process and increase the matching elements of that process. And I think the advice that you have for staffing leaders is bang on, spot on. I love it, Scott. This is why I love the show. This is why I love talking to you. It's bloody brilliant. So Scott, there's been a huge amount of interest in overseas expansion and accessing talent abroad or outside one's borders. And of course, this is something that isn't new to us here at CXC in our day jobs. But there's been a tremendous amount of investment that's been put into that sector, and a lot of that is being platformized and digitized to really take advantage of that move to access talent anywhere. But Scott, for the benefit of our audience, when we look at global expansion or hiring talent anywhere, is there any do's and don'ts in terms of advice should be prepared to give?
Yeah, I think, from a do's and don'ts perspective, I think it's pretty simple. Again, don't want to overcomplicate things, but it seems, I always say it seems pretty simple. Everyone says, well, for example, compliance. Well, that's a litmus test thing. You guys should do it. I can tell you most companies don't do it well. So when you automatically say, oh, we just assume you got great compliance, so you've already passed that test, you better validate it. So some of the do's are make sure you really understand local compliance and labor laws. In these global countries, expansion fails when businesses don't amount or account for worker classification, tax obligations, employment laws. They don't really figure out ways to mitigate risk that ensure 100% compliance. So that's the first thing. Make sure you really understand it. The other thing, another do is make sure you adapt adopt sort of an agile workforce strategy. Go beyond just the full-time employees. Go beyond, generalized use of payroll, EOR, AOR kind of solutions and contingent workforce models. Look for a partner that can create something that's fit for purpose for you. I can tell you, I know all the players in the place. What they do is they will tailor a little bit about their cookie cutter approach and then force it into your organization. That is a mistake. Work with an organization that will come in and work with you and design a solution that works for your environment. So be very agile and work with partners that have the same philosophy as you, and don't come out and with their pitch deck and say, here's how we're going to solve this, how we're going to solve that. Sit down and actually create something unique. And the other thing is make sure you're leveraging technology. Make sure you're leveraging technology and AI and figure out how your HR tech stack is working, how your AI-driven analytic data is being utilized. Use some predictive analytics as part of that so you start to head off the brick wall you're going to hit. Use some automation elements to optimize your workforce strategies, so on and so forth. Some of the don'ts, don't assume what works in one market works everywhere. Too many organizations are like, oh, this is where we do it here. Let's do it there. There's very different and unique labor laws, very different cultural differences. There are very different workforce expectations. So do not try and say because it works here. I mean, we see it ourselves, Connor, right? We're part of a global organization. What we hear from Australia, what we hear from you, it doesn't always work here in the United States.
No.
What we do in the United States doesn't always work with you guys. So even internally, we have to be aware of that. You also want to make sure you don't overlook the cost structure and the local benefits. Expansion isn't just about the salary. You must factor in local benefits, social contributions, compliance costs, so on and so forth. So you want to make sure you don't overlook those things. And the one main point that you don't want to do is rely on a single hiring model. If you've got a single hiring model, you are going to be stuck in the dark ages and go away like the dinosaurs. The best expansion strategies blend a very unique blend of full-time, contract, freelance, remote, something I call contract RPO structures, direct sourcing. All those different things need to be part of your solution.
I think that's excellent advice for our audience, Scott, that either going global or are global and just need that sort of sanity check. I think it's spot on. Scott, we've seen a lot of certainly in the press over in Europe, but also in the United States, a lot of return to work mandates. And of course, we're not a political show, but we've even seen that at the federal government level in the USA. But I think the world's largest bank by market value has also instructed its employees to come not home, but home to the office, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think you and I have worked remotely for some time, and we're working in remote organizations. But what's your take on this whole remote debate, Scott? We're sort of the privileged minority in a way, in terms of like we're the desk-based knowledge workers that, of course, get out into the field and go to conferences and meet our customers and meet our teams that are distributed. And then you've got about like millions of deskless workers that are in the factories or in the schools or in the colleges or whatnot. But where do you sit on it, Scott? Do you think there's room for some nuance in this debate, and it's not just like a zero-sum debate, either remote work bad, office good, or else remote work good, office bad?
Again, my perspective is I think we're in the center of a wave. And what I mean by a wave is COVID created one wave, right? That pushed everybody to being virtual or at least hybrid, and the world of work kept going. Now, there are some inefficiencies with being totally virtual in some environments. So I'm certainly not saying being back in the office doesn't have its benefits and not a decent strategy. But we went, one way in the wave, way to one side. We're now in the second wave that's coming through and going the opposite way. So it's a cross wave that's going to hit sort of an immovable path, and we're going to settle with some still water somewhere that's going to be probably in between, is what I believe is going to happen. So we're going to take some drastic steps. And as you just referenced, the financial institution, many companies are saying, hammer down, everybody's back in the office. In theory, makes sense. Frankly, if you talk to most people, they like the interaction with their employees around them. So I think in most cases that's a good thing. The challenge of that is it doesn't solve the people problem. Okay, so pushing everybody back into the office doesn't automatically create a cybersecurity expert out of thin air that's going to sit next to you. Okay, so talent is going to still dictate when you need that talent and need it desperately. You're going to still have to be flexible. So I think I don't know where it's going to all kind of fall out here, Connor. But we're in the middle of that second wave, and eventually it'll start to be calm waters, I think, here over the next 12 months as we see things shake out. But I think long term, I believe it'll be more and more organizations will have more of an adaptive hybrid element that will have certain skill sets they know can be virtual, certain skill sets that will be at home, that they will put on placards saying these are always going to be here local, and these other ones we know we're going to have to be nuanced. So I think there's going to be a lot of change. I don't think it'll ever be, okay, now we're all back and everyone's operating this way, because I know the global talent landscape. You're not going to find. So good luck to you. I wish you a lot of luck. And I'm not saying it to be a jerk here, but I see the data. So the data and the facts, and you hear the theory of alternative facts. I can tell you the real fact is that there's not people to do this stuff. And I get comments every once in a while like, oh, there's all kinds of people looking for work. Well, you're not going to take somebody that just worked as a waitress and now put them in and be your full stack developer, right? Those things don't work. So there's, again, going back to logic, there are people that just don't think through the problem very well and automatically spit out what they believe is, oh, there's all kinds of people we don't need. I used to do a lot of lobbying here in the federal sector about the dumb change that we're being pushed down on leveraging of talent, both in the staffing side and on the AOR side. And it was disheartening talking to lawmakers, both on the congressional side and the Senate side, because they really weren't listening to what the facts are. They just were espousing certain things that they believed were real without any real tangible information. So until we get people looking at the real hard facts and saying how we're going to solve them, it's going to be a lot of hearsay back and forth.
Yeah, I agree, Scott. So, Scott, one of the things we touched on briefly earlier was on artificial intelligence and its potential impact on jobs. So I'm going to mention an organization that some of our US listeners don't rate highly, which is the World Economic Forum, for a whole host of reasons. But we have to assume that their data and their predictions have some degree of accuracy given their size and scale. So the World Economic Forum are forecasting essentially a net job loss of about 17 million as a result of AI. So yes, there's going to be, I think, around 65 million odd jobs created, but about 83 million or so lost, right? So what's that, about 17 million net loss according to them. And based on their analysis, Scott, they will be in those so-called white collar professions that we referenced earlier in our program or our show. And for me, I've become like a sort of super user of AI, right? And it pains me because I'm equally deeply skeptical about the unintended consequences of unrestricted AI growth, right? And that's what worries me, particularly around the whole jobs displacement thing. And, when you strip jobs displacement back, what that means is those people don't got jobs, and there's no guarantee that they'll get a job, right? And that there will be sufficient jobs for them, right? Depending on your outlook, of course. Now, you could look at this glass half full and go, do you know what? Look back to the Industrial Revolution. All the horses got killed. People were working in the fields, then they were moved into factories, and then they moved into offices, right? But it strikes me that AI might be somewhat different this time because of the speed and the intelligence that it brings. And I don't think humans, to the best of my knowledge, have had an intelligence competitor yet. And AI is certainly a competitor for intelligence. Now, it might not be a competitor for common sense, Scott, right? But that's probably a conversation for another time. But I suppose what my question really is, Scott, is are you concerned about artificial intelligence or artificial general intelligence's impact on jobs and potentially humanity?
Well, if I said I wasn't concerned, I'd be nuts, right? So that is very true. There in those figures are daunting figures. Um, the thing is, do we run and hide, or do we figure out how we are going to start to engage with it now? And that goes back to, again, sort of the redevelopment and retraining and upskilling, up training those likely repositioned roles now. And more universities, more organizations, uh, um, more and more governments need to come up with strategies and programs that are preparing the workforce for these changes. Because as I mentioned, in STEM, there's going to be more people than there will be jobs. That doesn't mean there's not going to be people looking for work. It just means qualified individuals that have the skills to be able to do that, or trained to be able to do that, aren't going to be available. I see that potential um, opportunity of the staggering numbers you just outlined there, Connor, as a great opportunity to redevelop talent to make sure we're ready for the new world. The problem is most people are thinking about time and place today, not thinking about time and place tomorrow. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to guide that or change that. But if we're thinking about this the right way and say that's a reality, people, number one, need to be students in the games individually and say, what am I going to do? Because I'm probably one of those resources that may be impacted this way. How am I going to change, adjust, and get prepared for it? And also have employers and have global organizations figure out how we create strategies to encompass and pull in that new talent pool and leverage it to its benefit in any way we can. I don't know that the answer is. I'm certainly scared. I'm also optimistic about what it can do, because again, we're still talking about what we do as a business is all humanistic. So you're never going to take out the humanistic approach of what we need to do as a business, because even though AI can think, AI really can't think through a reading between the lines of scenarios, or reading a room, or being able to check nuance. Those things are always going to be us, man. So that skill is never going to be displaced. It's going to be enhanced a little bit by leveraging the tools. So unfortunately, I don't have an answer. I agree with you. I'm worried about it. I'm trying to head into it more instead of being fearful of it. But the shape it takes, man, normally you'd say in the next 10 years, we're probably going to see in the next 18 months, 2 years, how disruptive this is.
Yeah, I agree. I like Scott. I'm loving our conversation. It's so positive, but also so insightful. But I think, to your point, this AI revolution, it's like being on a roller coaster, and you don't know when it's actually going to stop, right, and where it's going to go, right. It's like the never-ending roller coaster, because it's just moving so fast, and moving left, moving right. It's a fascinating time that we're living in. But to your point, I think we just got to embrace it as much as we can, and get the grips with it. But Scott, as I mentioned, I'm enjoying our conversation, but like all good things in life, it unfortunately needs to come to an end. And I want to finish, if I may, Scott, with asking a question we ask all of our guests, which is, what is your prediction or predictions for the future of work, Scott?
Wow. So now you're asking me to put on my genie hat here and come up with no.
We gotta rub the lamp. We gotta rub the lamp.
I'll try and be as concise. That's right. Here we go. I'm rubbing the CXC bottle. Here we go. Um, I'll try and be as concise as I can, because sometimes I can be overly verbose and uh, too wordy. So let me try and condense as much as I can. I think really the future of work is going to be borderless. It's going to be technology driven, but still human first. I think businesses that embrace the agility and remote work and leverage AI and other technologies are going to lead the next decade. I think there's going to be a rise of talent without borders. I think that's going to continue. I think there's going to obviously be local hiring. Everything's going to go back, especially here in the States, are trying to be back into their offices, but that doesn't solve the talent challenges. I think there's going to be more of a flexible, on-demand, skill-based workforces, and less focus on full-time. It's going to be more flexible and fit for purpose type of hiring modeling. I think there's going to be more, as we talked about, the scary piece of AI augmented workforce strategies that are going to be thrown in there, how they coexist with human workers, how they're allowing business to increase efficiency while also focusing on human effort for creativity, for logic, for leadership, for strategy. And I think the first thing, because of the world of work and the global talent pool is open for everyone to take advantage of, compliance first hiring is going to be the major focus. Again, I use that example of, well, we expect you're doing compliant things. Most of our contemporary peers can't do it well at all. You want to partner with an organization that really knows it. We've been doing it 32 years. We know this stuff, and we know it's ever changing. There are some global markets that legislative changes are happening almost weekly, and you need to be on top of it. So make sure you have a compliance-first hiring practice. As governments tighten labor laws around AI, as they tighten laws around remote work and global hiring strategies and compliance, the compliance side will become a competitive advantage for you as an employer. So, I think, again, not to toot our own horn here, I'm part of CXC. I think we're at the forefront of this transformation. I think we're helping organizations navigate the future with confidence, with agility, with compliance. But more than anything, it's about people first. And I think everybody out there, with us or without us in terms of CXC, find a partner that is actually going to engage with you in different ways about customized solutions.
Scott, I absolutely love that compelling and positive future of work. And Scott, I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. I know we have regular conversations, but this was a great conversation. So, Scott, thanks so much for your time. Thanks for making the time for me and also, more importantly, for our audience. Scott, where can our audience come and find you? Where's the best place to come and talk to you, Scott, so that they can arrange a follow-up conversation?
Well, you can come right to me via email anytime. That's scott.aicher, AICHER, at cxcglobal.com. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm an open LinkedIn networker, so please connect with me. I'd love to chat with you. I'm open to talking this all day long. This is my passion. This is what I love to do. This is not a job for me. This is what I enjoy doing. So I'm happy to talk this stuff all day long. It may seem boring to some, but I love this stuff. So please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to engage, and I'm expecting now. I think, Connor, you give away like the equivalent of the Academy Award for your speaker.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
You're on the list. You're on the list. You're on the list. I can't comment any further.
All right. Well, listen, I really appreciate, Connor. You're a gentleman, a scholar. I really appreciate you calling me into this. Your podcasts are amazing. What you're doing to help the industry is tremendous. It's a honor to be a colleague with you here, and let's continue to make tangible impact in a positive way in this crazy industry we're in.
Wow. Right back at you, Scott. And Scott, listen, I've thoroughly enjoyed this, and I think our audience will too. And I've learned a lot, and I love getting those insights from you. And Scott, listen, wishing you continued success and every success. And there you have it, folks. Scott Aicher, President at CXC Global America. Scott, great to see you. And I will see you in person very soon. I'm looking forward to it. Take care.
All right. Thanks a lot, Connor.
Thank you for listening to the Open Talent Report with Connor Heaney. If you found this podcast informative and engaging, make sure you subscribe, tell your friends, and follow us on all your favorite streaming platforms.